My dear friends, Bobby Kennedy, a month before he was assassinated in 1968, said this to the graduating class at the University of Kansas: "The gross national product does not allow for the health of our children or the joy of their play. It does not include the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. The GNP measures neither our wisdom nor our compassion, neither our courage nor our sacrifice. In short, the gross national product measures everything except that which makes life worth living." We come here different people than we were last Rosh Hashanah. Different as a nation, too. It's been a roller coaster, a great year for the stock market, an awful year for fighting hate, a hopeful year for Memphis, from downtown to crosstown, a devastating year for Texas, Florida, Mexico, and the Caribbean. In Israel, it's been an appalling year internally, with the current government caving in to the ultra-Orthodox partners of Bibi Netanyahu, who called reform and all non-Orthodox Judaism, and I quote, "perhaps kind of a religion, but a foreign religion like Christianity and Islam." This may be the first time in Jewish history a group of right-wing rabbis has managed to insult three religions in one sentence. In a scathing letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu, Jewish philanthropist Charles Bronfman noted, and I quote, "To my knowledge, no other country in the world with Jews denies any Jew based on denomination," end quote. No matter how the Israel we love deals with extremists in the new year, whether in settlement outposts on the West Bank or within the current government itself, what is new is that modern orthodoxy, which used to go along with the state rabbinate, is finally joining in the reform-led fight for equal rights, because now some of their own rabbis aren't kosher enough in the eyes of fundamentalist Jews. This is the Jewish season, though, to ask a different question than any Israeli politician or American politician can answer. And that question is essentially Bobby Kennedy's. What are the things that make life worth living? And I don't mean wine or chocolate. I studied this question intensively with a Cornell University professor and expert in the field of positive psychology and personal well-being. The field centers on three pillars: positive emotions versus the negative ones these high holy days urge us to let go of, and which we all carry in some measures. Emotions like worry, stress, fear, anxiety, envy, sadness, anger, mistrust. The second pillar consists of positive traits that can lead to personal well-being, like empathy, resilience, courage, compassion. And the third pillar are positive relationships and communities like your family and this temple, where positive traits and emotions are emphasized, like gratitude, joy, faith, inspiration, serenity, hope, love. From a Jewish lens, places like temple are critical because in Judaism, worthwhile living is never a solo act. If you want to go fast, as the saying goes, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In Judaism, spirituality itself is tied to others, and in an inclusive community like temple tied to an entire city, with no unnatural division between this half of the sanctuary circle inside and the community half outside. the connection is seamless. A loving group of open-hearted Jews where joy and gratitude, faith, hope, and love, resilience, courage, and empathy are all emphasized, not only on this holiday or a fall weekend, but for a lifetime. Visitors and newcomers are often the first to notice this positive, equality-driven, positive expression of Judaism. When out-of-town relatives of bar and bat mitzvah kids are here, it happened again in recent weeks. Jewish leaders from bigger cities who've seen it all come up to me and say, "Rabbi, if I lived here, I'd come every week." My reply is always, "No, you wouldn't." But thanks for affirming the impact this expression of Judaism can make, more than any personal compliment. The good news, and this service has seen it tonight, is that more than a few Jews have moved to Memphis recently, and it is their new eyes and creative minds that will be the key to the future vitality and vibrancy of Southern Judaism in the decades ahead. A small Jewish millennial renaissance has already begun. The seed was planted 6 years ago when a temple rabbi, 3 volunteers, and generous donors created a summer fellowship for 19 to 25-year-olds. Building on the positive buzz generated by that June-July initiative for a few young adults, a local Jewish professional named Kara grew it into a year-round community for hundreds of young Jewish adults and named it Connect TI. The missing piece? A physical space closer to bright young professionals in the heart of Memphis to serve as a living room, literally a bridge between downtown and here for all of us, no matter what our age. That cozy new extension at Crosstown has a 2-word mantra: better together. We are likely the only city in America where civic leaders who are not Jewish are supporting what the Jewish community says it wants: for Judaism and the Jewish people to go on in the South. Thanks to the New Jews, Temple is reaching and inspiring for everyone's benefit. If we can continue to connect the unaffiliated Jews already here and new Jews moving here, bit by bit, to this expression of Judaism whose principles are embraceable and relatable to so many of our younger generation, from equality of the sexes to tikkun olam, then we will have fulfilled the words of Temple's honorary president and Jewish community benefactor who said, and I quote, "You do the greatest good when you reach the greatest number of people." So what is it about Reform Judaism that fits so well in the South? Part of it is our outreach to the entire community based on a Jewish idea that we render greatest service to God by serving humanity. But I also think Reform resonates because it's a joyful Judaism centering on positivity, on the positive potential within each of us, by emphasizing the good in people and in the world and bringing the positive to the fore when everyone is down. We fight despair by daring to hope and by focusing on the positive potential, even if many people still fixate on the dark and the negative. You know the old Jewish memo? Worry now, details to follow. It's funny, but it's not congruent with Jewish belief and thought. When you sing, hopefully tonight, the last line of the closing song in Adon Olam, Adonai li v'lo ira, you know what it means? It means it's because of the safety, security, serenity, positivity we receive from Judaism's message about God and life that we never have to be afraid, even when we go to sleep. And when you wake, you'll be all right, simply by striving to be the best you can be, by loving and accepting who you are, by embracing your unique God-given talents, cultivating them and living them, you can, Judaism says, discover positive purpose in life. The negative emotions like fear, they lead to escape. Anger leads to attack. Sadness leads to withdrawal. But the positive emotions we underscore here, like joy, gratitude, love, faith, and hope, open us up, broaden us, and improve us. Not that anyone here should strive to be in a state of constant joy. People who are only happy are either on drugs or experiencing what psychiatrists call mania. But a steady diet of positivity changes the way the brain works, the heart feels, and the soul moves. And an accumulation of positive emotions can even undo the effects of the negative ones and build inner resilience so that we can bounce back from life's storms and become better versions of ourselves. And friends, that's the whole aim of these High Holy Days, to open ourselves up so that we can become better versions of ourselves. Now, to be clear, I'm not advocating extreme anything. Believe it or not, even empathy has a dark side, as I learned from Yale professor Paul Bloom in his provocative book entitled Against Empathy. His argument is that empathy is a poor moral guide in almost all realms of life, from public policy and private charity to relationships. Why? Because empathy favors whoever is close to your in-group and leads to apathy against and toward everyone else. He's not really against empathy, but he's just saying that empathy without reason is hazardous because, and I quote, it emanates from the murky bayou of the gut. What does he suggest instead? A mixture of personal caring and a rational calculation of what helps most. To make his point, consider parenting. Almost all moms and dads have a terrible time tolerating the discomfort of their children. Yet it's often essential. If parents allowed their children's pain to overwhelm them, how would parents make their kids go to the doctor, do their geometry, or spend their first night away from home? Good parenting, he writes, involves coping with the short-term suffering of your child, actually sometimes causing the short-term suffering of your child. If empathy means putting yourself in someone else's shoes, think about it. That's easiest to do when the shoes are in your neighborhood, in your friend group or social group. It's much easier for my daughter, my younger daughter, to feel empathy for the homeless guy at the corner of White Station and Poplar we drive by often than it is for her to empathize with all the suffering Latino kids in Memphis who live even closer than Poplar and White Station, but in a different direction. Studies show it's also more common to give charity based on social groups and emotion rather than a rational assessment of where it has the greatest impact. Empathy works in our Jewish love for Israel, since Israel is in our gut, but sometimes that outpouring of emotion for our own leaves us caring less or not at all about those who are suffering on the other side through no fault of their own. An overdose of empathy, even though we need empathy, speaks to synagogues too. Over the years, I've quietly helped search committees and others find new leaders, not because I'm leaving this pulpit, but because outside the 12% of American Jews who are Orthodox, I believe for the 88% who are not, the best hope for the Jewish future in any city is creating and sustaining great synagogues like this one across the country. Centers of excellence with compassionate, high-functioning, high-minded leaders, clergy and lay leaders who treat every man and woman and every human being with the same dignity and respect. And sadly, if you have grown kids as we do, there are too few congregations like ours nationally, even in larger cities, with 50 to 250 times the number of Jews in Memphis. I recently advised one congregation to beware of how an overdose of empathy can lead to burnout. How so? As Professor Bloom teaches, when you live in a state of hyper-communion with others, being on call 24/7, including Saturdays and Sundays, too much empathy can lead to emotional depletion. Look at us, where one synagogue out of 7 in Memphis takes care of most of the affiliated Jews and virtually all of the unaffiliated. If key bridges to America's Jewish tomorrow, if the key bridge, and I'm throwing this out there, is a relevant, forward-looking synagogue in any city like this one, what's needed even more than empathy is compassion for sure, but as Bloom argues, a rational calculation of what does the greatest good for the greatest number of people, if that's the goal. Just one final ingredient for becoming better versions of ourselves, in addition to positivity. 3 weeks from tonight, we begin Genesis all over again on Simchat Torah Eve, where our Bible opens with God making humans, you know this, in God's image and likeness. But Rabbi Jonathan Sacks notes that this phrase has become so familiar to us that we forget how paradoxical it is, since for the Hebrew Bible, God has no image or likeness. As the Torah quickly makes clear, what we have in common with God is freedom and moral responsibility. And that's the final ingredient, my friends. A deeper understanding of freedom is fundamental to worthwhile living. Many of you may know the word for Egypt in Hebrew, Mitzrayim, means narrow places. Egypt was narrow because Jews had no rights, no freedom. It was a place of constriction. We who live in this great country freely must relate differently to what narrowness means. Mitzrayim may mean narrow thinking, or simply not seeing the boxes we live in which prevent us and others from becoming the best versions of themselves. But like empathy, freedom is nuanced. It isn't always about the freedom to expand. Sometimes it's about the freedom to contract. That's the paradox of being married, isn't it? When you limit yourself to one partner and self-contract in a sacred relationship with only one other person, infinite possibilities unfold for a worthwhile, purposeful life. Rabbi Naomi Levy even refers to marriage, and I quote her, as the sacred art of shrinking. Isn't that great? Freedom, then, is about choosing one's way within the boundaries of a relationship or even the boundaries of a city like Memphis, where the Jewish principles Temple stands for really do impact the future of this city, just as the choices our ancestors made shaped theirs in other places. That fundamental freedom to choose exists within us more than we appreciate. Easier said than done when you're a survivor of a hurricane or survived a death or another loss. But if Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl arrived at this conclusion, the freedom to choose in the face of the unspeakable horror he witnessed, where innocent Jews and others had no choice over their destiny, then that possibility exists for you and me, especially through positive communities like this one, where we celebrate and discover the inner strength to go on, the resilience to bounce back, with a core commitment to bringing people together across all lines, something we need in this age of widening gaps more than ever before. I want to close with a seemingly simple question. When is Rosh Hashanah? When does the new year begin? The answer, the early rabbis say, is not found on your calendar. but in your deeds, when you recognize the humanity and divinity within every being and act accordingly. That quote is not from 2,000 years ago. It is from it's not from last year, 2016. It precedes the prayer book in your lap. The new year does not begin when the calendar says so. It begins when we recognize the humanity and divinity within every human being and act accordingly. That's what we strive to do every day and night here. Practice Judaism as a positive faith, deed-focused, mindfully practiced, synagogue-anchored, and only in Memphis, tied to a city since 1854 with folks just like you, committed to highlighting the humanity and divinity within every human being, whether you are a millennial or whether you're a senior, high school student, whether you're 13 or 83. So, what's our Jewish answer to Bobby Kennedy's question about worthwhile living? A positive faith, grounded in freedom, with positive emotions and positive traits that will inspire the spreading of goodness and mitzvahs that we hope will resound like the sound of tomorrow's shofar. The fresh start we all want on Rosh Hashanah is within you and me. This is the time and place to rediscover your power, to start anew and begin again, and make 5778 the most positive and purposeful year you ever lived. Ken Yehi Ratzon, so may it be for you and me. And let us say, Amen.